From the Radio Las Cruces News Desk, I'm Ernesto Garcia, speaking with Lieutenant Governor Diane Denish. Let's talk about your campaign coming up. Real quick, congratulations on the fundraising efforts that have come through and the numbers that have been released. Puts you as a very strong competitor coming up in the upcoming election.
Well, as you know, I don't have a primary, and so I'm not worrying about the June 1st primary. I just want people to get out and vote for their favorite primary candidates, whoever they might be. But yes, you know, I've spent my life in New Mexico developing relationships, and I think our fundraising is very indicative of that we've spent a long time developing relationships, serving the people, doing good constituent service, helping small business, fighting for education. And I think when you do that, people are willing to invest in you.
Let's talk about small business. You're here in Las Cruces, able to meet with some small business people. What do you think they're going to be saying to you? What are some of the things you think they're going to be discussing with you and some of the debates that you might have?
Well, I think what I'm going to hear from them is that they need more access to capital, more credit. Small businesses want to invest in their futures and the future of their community, but right now credit, as we all know, is very tight. And how are we going to help with that? And what are some of the incentives we're going to provide for business, as well as how are we going to make things a little more friendly for them? And we have some ideas on that. We're proposing a one-stop shop online where people can do licensing, permitting, resource and networking all online now that we have our state Sunshine Portal. We're looking at things that we think will make it just easier for business to do business in New Mexico.
Well, speaking of which, you've been a very strong advocate along from your office about website and public access to website and working with groups and organizations. I mean, it's something that doesn't get much coverage, but it's something that's certainly going to leave the door open in the future for people to be a little bit more accountable with their politicians and elected officials.
Right, and you know, people want information and we ought to give it to them. That's kind of the bottom line. The Sunshine Portal is going to let people look and see how we're spending taxpayers' money, where that money comes from. Does it come from taxes, personal, corporate? Does it come from permitted fees? Where is it coming from? How much is there? Also looking by department to see who does what job, the names and salaries of exempt employees, which we've heard a lot of discussion about. And I hope that this is just the beginning of the budding of the flower, that over time the Sunshine Portal will be the place where people can access more and more information. Our vision is for it to have every public hearing of any kind posted on the web. Eventually there'll be, when we get the technology up to speed, there'll be webcasting probably of many open meetings on the web, and letting the taxpayers know what's going on. And when people say, well, I don't know anything about that, we can point them directly to where they can go, because we don't know every detail either. But we want them to have a place to go find the information that they need.
We'll see something like your opponents, whoever is the one that will come out, will probably be asking about, but I think it's one thing that they'll have to be competitive with you about, because you've been strong about using the new technology to help state, not to be against state.
Right, and the other thing about technology, it's a way for us to save money at the state level. We just talked about earlier in the spring, we talked about the opportunity to use technology for our teleconferencing so that state employees don't have to drive and charge per diem and have a state car and run up expenses. That if we can use technology, that's a much more efficient way for them to go to a meeting, say, of 10, 20, 30 people than it is for them to get in the car, have to spend the night, be away from their families, away from their soccer games, you know, all the things that they like to do too. So we're looking at technology as one of the things we really need to invest in the next few years. And when we get some of the money from the healthcare reform bill, we're going to have a lot of technology coming into play for our rural community health centers and community health. And we need to make sure we're prioritizing capital outlay for broadband connectivity so that community health centers can take advantage of that federal money, and that we can, in fact, provide healthcare services in these outlying areas before people have to come to someplace in town, and save the taxpayers, their own personal resources.
State employees seem to be a lot more on edge, and morale seems to be a lot down after the legislative session. Now there's a concern as to what does the future hold, what does it not hold. APS public schools having problems, public schools here in Las Cruces dealing with bus services. How do you get the message across to New Mexicans that stay with this, will survive and get through?
Well, you know, that's exactly the difficulty. It's a challenge for everybody, and it's really about working together, and it's about finding alternatives to layoffs. In many communities, as you probably know, they're thinking about trimming pay as opposed to laying people off. And we need to, but that's a very collaborative effort where people sit down and work together. Of course, in education specifically, we don't want the classroom and direct services to kids to suffer. And so superintendents are making, I know, very tough decisions about where to cut, but I want to encourage them to cut at the top, not at the place where the services are most important. And that includes teachers, staff people, the people that keep the wheels rolling in those schools. Sometimes the people at the bottom of the pay scale are the people that are most critical to what happens in a school facility.
Recently, the President, along with Congress, passed a health care bill. Have you had a chance to look at it and see how it's going to affect New Mexico in some ways, or is it in positive, or in whatever ways that we have to be alert on?
Well, let me just say, in a state where we have anywhere between 420 and 500,000 people uninsured or underinsured at any one time, it's going to be a positive for us to get those people on insurance. We're going to do what we can to, one, develop the workforce to absorb the new people coming into the system. We're going to look at our fiscal budget in a way that we're going to make sure that we're putting the resources we need to. We're not going to go out there and cut children off of children's health insurance plan like our neighboring state did. We're not going to let people drop through the cracks. But it's the insurance companies have an opportunity for people to insure many more people. By making their products affordable, and if you like your insurance, you get to keep your insurance. And so I'm going to give it a chance. I think it's hopeful, and in New Mexico, where we have such high uninsured population, I don't think it's anything but good for our state.
If you're to be elected governor, obviously you're the most experienced, being a lieutenant governor for so many years. What is going to be the big difference between your administration and the current administration we've had?
Well, I'm a different kind of I'll be a different kind of governor and a different kind of person because we just are. And people say, well, how are you going to say you're different? I don't really have to say I'm different from the governor because I am different. And I am very much a person that brings all the stakeholders to the table. And then when it's time to make those decisions, you've gotten everybody's input. And people either go away equally happy or equally unhappy sometimes. I'm going to be a very fiscally responsible person and governor that is going to work very closely with the legislature, as I have done on a number of bipartisan efforts to make sure. But I'm going to have a focus, a narrow focus, I think I would say, on the things that matter most, and that's jobs, education, health care, and making sure that New Mexico is doing the right things for the future and for our families.
One last question. Expect to see you more in Las Cruces down the road?
Absolutely. I have that little house over the hill in Hillsboro, and so we take every chance we can to come down here to this southern part of the state and enjoy both Doña Ana County, Sierra County, and surrounding areas. So we'll be down here many times, as we have been in the past, to visit.
Is there an email address where somebody can go if they want to sign up to be involved in your campaign coming up?
They can go to www.dianedenish.com, volunteer, give money, friend us on Facebook, follow us, see our videos, see my positions on things that are of interest to them.
All right. We have been speaking with Lieutenant Governor Diane Denish here at Radio Las Cruces News.
Thank you.